Today I'm learning about Napoleonic war tactics. Very weird. It's making me think about American football for some reason. And we are back. The holidays are finally over, except for New Year's. We're gonna get to that in a little bit. I've already promised the Scots that we're gonna take a look at Hogmanay. That's their big New Year's to do. I think we're gonna do the Russian New Year as well, so stay tuned for that. But a lot of you guys have been requesting for me to get back to like the military history stuff, which I am more than glad to do because you guys know that I love military history. Now I was really kind of stuck on what military history to do because there are so many requests and they're kind of all over the place. But since a lot of my videos lately have been about Britain, I've had a ton of comments mentioning Napoleon. Plus, a lot of you just asked for it. And one of my most devoted subscribers, Melkor, who comments on pretty much all of my videos, which is totally cool. I'm glad you're watching. They said you should react to Epic History World War I series. He has a video for each year of the war, and I highly recommend his Napoleon series as well. Well, we're gonna get to World War I because I'd like to follow up with that after doing some World War II stuff. But after looking at Epic History TV's channel, there's like 20 videos, maybe not quite 20. There's a lot of videos on Napoleon. So I think it's going to take us a while to get through this. Zors767 says, if you like military tactics, you should watch Epic History TV's Napoleonic Wars playlist. It's the best on tactics and strategy. That's what I like to hear, so I'm looking forward to it. Enzo Nicholas says, please watch France Geography Now and the Napoleonic Wars by Epic TV History, or Epic History TV. Ugh. I would like to get to the geography stuff. I think we're going to start doing some more geography stuff in the very near future. I've actually got my very first video in mind that I'd like to do on that. I think it's going to be a lot of fun. Voltek Pavosan, sorry if I didn't pronounce that correctly. Napoleonic series next? Yeah. Raul Petrescu says, Epic History TV Napoleonic Wars is awesome. You can watch them if you like. Well, I do like, and we're going to watch them. And somebody's name in Russian that I cannot pronounce. I really apologize. I should learn how to read Russian. I recommend watching the series of the project Epic History, The Wars of Napoleon. Compared to 1941, there will be some similarities. So I hope so. I hope that there are going to be a lot of similarities between this and some of the stuff that I learned about as far as tactics go in the Eastern Front videos that I did. So I will admit to not knowing very much about Napoleon. I know that comes as a shock based on all of the other history videos that I've done. It's not that Napoleon is not taught here in the United States. He is. I actually vividly remember reading about him in textbooks and so forth. I just feel like even then, though, not a whole lot of time is devoted to learning about Napoleon. He seems to kind of just be a very, very tiny part of the whole world history that we learn. And it's also very apparent to me reading your comments on a lot of the other videos that I did on British stuff, just how important Napoleon is to British history in particular. And it really points out to me the very different perspectives that Americans and the Brits have on history. For instance, the Revolutionary War or the War of Independence for us is like a mega huge deal. Obviously, it's going to be a big deal to us because it is the beginning of our country, whereas to the Brits, it's really just kind of a footnote. It's very, very small in the whole grand scheme of things as far as the British Empire goes. And I've heard from the Brits that you guys don't even really learn about it in school very much at all. So, and I think Napoleon kind of points out another difference because it seems like he was kind of a big nemesis of Britain for a little while there. And you guys fought a pretty big war with him, whereas here in the United States, Napoleon is kind of like this European figure that did stuff over in Europe while we were busy doing other stuff over here. So we have an extremely different take on Napoleon than you guys do over in Europe, I feel like. And when it comes to things like the British Empire and Napoleon, I don't really have any strong feelings one way or another on them. So my purpose of watching all of this is just to learn the history, to learn what happened. But getting back to learning about Napoleon in history, we spend just a very, very, very tiny amount of time on him. Plus you also have to take into account that it was like 20 or 25 years ago when I learned about him in history, and there's just no way I'm gonna remember a lot of that stuff. What I do remember is that he is French and he had a big navy. He fought in the Battle of Waterloo with the British. I think at the time I memorized all of the dates and the different battles and stuff like that, but I mean, all of that's just gone now. The other issue is that when I was a kid, I really was kind of rebellious when it came to schoolwork, and so one of the ways that I expressed that rebellion was to try to get out of it as much as possible. So my approach to history when I was in school, even though I enjoyed the subject, was pretty much to just memorize what I had to know to pass the test, which meant that as soon as the test was over, I promptly forgot most of what I had learned quote unquote. But as an adult, I can certainly appreciate it a lot more than I did as a kid. And so now I would like to take the time to kind of go back and learn a lot of this stuff and kind of fill in my knowledge gaps. And I'm sure I'm not the only one with this experience. I'm sure that there are a lot of adults out there with the same kind of story. So anyway, as we get into Epic History TV's Napoleon series, I chose this one with the infantry tactics to start out with because I feel like that's something I should know about before I start watching the videos. So anyway, let's take a look at Napoleonic infantry tactics.
In the Napoleonic Wars, infantry fought in close order, packed together, standing shoulder to shoulder. But why present such an easy target for the enemy? First, command and control. Before radios, orders had to be relayed by shouted commands, drums or bugles, difficult enough in the smoke and din of battle.
I'm not going to pause it too much, but I just wanted to say that this is something that I've always kind of wondered about. Why in the world did they just fight in rows and just kind of march in rows like that? Because it's just so easy just to plow them down. I'm interested to hear what he has to say about this.
Had to be relayed by shouted commands, drums or bugles, difficult enough in the smoke and din of battle. Almost impossible if troops were scattered. Second, firepower. Smoothbore muskets were inaccurate beyond about 80 yards, so volley fire, firing en masse, was the best way to inflict physical and psychological damage on the enemy. Third, morale. Soldiers were much more willing to advance into danger or hold the line if they did so together as a unit, urging each other on. Fourth, defense against cavalry. Scattered infantry were easy targets for horsemen. Only by sticking together could they fight them off. The basic tactical unit of infantry was the battalion. A French line battalion had, in theory, 840 men, but in practice, nearer 500 to 600. Our example here has 605 men, a typical strength for a battalion on campaign.
Okay, so I'm looking at this right here. So all of the different sizes, battalions, companies, all of that stuff, I'm still having to kind of wrap my head around that and learn about that. But this right here, we see the main line of troops, and then behind them we see more scattered dots. Are those like the battalion leaders? Maybe he'll get into it.
The men were divided into 6 companies, 4 fusilier companies, and 2 flank companies. On the right, the grenadiers, made up of the tallest, strongest men, often detached to form elite all-grenadier units. And on the left, the voltigeurs, specialist light infantry, used for skirmishing in front of the battalion. Skirmishers moved independently, used cover, and fired at will to harass and unsettle the enemy, while preventing enemy skirmishers carrying out the same task.
Interesting.
Most armies also had specialist light infantry units for this role, such as the British 95th Rifles, French Chasseurs à Pied, and Austrian and Prussian Jaeger battalions. The traditional battlefield formation was the line, all companies formed up alongside each other, 3 ranks deep. Line formation maximised the number of men who could fire their muskets at the enemy, and limited casualties from artillery fire. But it was extremely vulnerable to cavalry if it could be outflanked. And even for well-drilled troops, it was difficult to keep the line straight while advancing across broken ground. So for manoeuvre and attack, battalions usually formed a column of divisions. This was a more flexible formation that allowed the battalion to advance quickly, though it presented a larger target to enemy guns, firing solid round shot that would tear through several ranks, and far fewer men could fire their muskets at the enemy. Theoretically, therefore, the battalion would deploy into line before reaching the enemy. But carrying out this slow manoeuvre under fire wasn't always possible or sensible. So some commanders kept their men in column, relying on momentum to break the enemy line.
I know this is probably a very stupid observation, but for some reason this is making me think about American football and all of the different positions that happen on the football field. the linemen, the linebackers, the safeties. I'm blanking on some of the positions, but I don't know, this is just making me think about American football for some reason. It's almost like every play they've got a battle plan that they've drawn out and they're carrying it out sort of like this. It's very weird.
This was a risky tactic that often worked against raw troops, but led to high casualties when facing better trained infantry, like British redcoats. A column could be closed up quickly to provide protection from cavalry, or if there was time, could form a square. With bayonets fixed, the battalion formed an all-round defence that often resembled more of a rectangle. Enemy cavalry could surround the battalion, but not break in, as horses won't charge a solid wall of men and steel. But an infantry square was extremely vulnerable to artillery fire, and could only move very slowly. Changing quickly and smoothly from one formation to another, especially under fire, required training, practice, and experience. In 1809, the Austrian army began to use the battalion mass formation, crude but more suited to hastily trained conscripts. This was a dense column with limited firepower and huge vulnerability to enemy cannon. But it could quickly close up to repel cavalry using the same principle as the square, but without the complex drill, and was much more maneuverable.
Okay, that video was a lot shorter than I thought it was going to be, but it was actually really informative to me. The main thing I got from it was that there is a lot more that goes into these infantry tactics than I had thought. You have different companies with different names and different functions. They're all trained differently. It looks like there was kind of like some special forces. I don't think he went into very much detail about what those dots were kind of backing each line. I'm just assuming that they were kind of leaders that shouted out orders to the line, but let me know if I'm wrong about that. It also said that there was a band formation, so I'm assuming that's like drummers and buglers. And if I'm not mistaken, the buglers kind of had different tunes that they played for each different type of command. But then you have the infantries of the different armies, so we talked about the British Redcoats, and then we have the French army, the Austrian army, I believe. The tactics changed based on whether or not they were really well-trained soldiers, or if they were just conscripts. Yeah, I don't know why my brain went to American football with this, it just did. It also made me think of like the halftime shows that happen in American football where we have the bands that do all of these different formations and stuff. I don't know, I know that's a very stupid analogy, it's just where my head went. So I would imagine that a ton of training went into learning these different formations for the infantry. I mean, I can just imagine them out in the fields practicing marching like all day long. And I kind of wonder, is this where marching as we know it today kind of came from? Now, obviously our infantry soldiers today are not marching in lines like this, but I know that in training and drills they do marches. So I'm wondering if that's just kind of what descended from all of this.
A standing men, a gunning men, a shooting men, the best I can.
I also really liked how it showed the graphics of the battalion and then the companies. That actually helps me a lot seeing it in that format, because during the World War II videos I was watching, he kept talking about companies and stuff, and I just didn't know kind of how to picture that. So it looks like it would be really interesting to learn the different tactics of the different armies, because I'm sure that the British had different tactics than the French did, for instance. And as we get into these Napoleonic War videos, I'm sure we're going to kind of see a lot of those differences and which ones were more successful than others. And I'm sure that there are a lot of naval tactics too, which I absolutely know nothing about. And so since I know that the navies played a huge part in these wars, I'm wondering if they're going to get into that in any of these videos. But anyway, I know that that was a really short video, but I'm really glad I watched it because I think it's going to give me a better appreciation for these other videos that we're going to get into in this series. Also, if you guys can answer any of my questions, I would really appreciate that, doing that in the comments below. We're going to be doing one of these Napoleonic War videos every other one that I put out. We've got another Al Murray coming up very shortly. I'd like to get into a little bit of Rome and Greece, and also get into some oversimplified that's been requested a lot. There's just so much to learn and cover. I feel like I could do this for 10 years and barely scratch the surface. So anyway, Roger and I thank you guys for your support on this channel. Oh, by the way, he's got a Napoleonish hat on. He's really excited to learn about Napoleon too. Right, Roger? So there you have it. Also, if you enjoyed this video, make sure to like and subscribe. Got a lot more coming your way, so stay tuned, and we will see you next time.